sitting here and we're having a great conversation about men's mental health, and we're talking about the scripts, we're talking about all the different factors, and I think that we would broadly perceive that maybe society has at least got the needle pointed in the right direction on reducing pressures and so on. And at the same time, what's running through my mind is depression and suicide risk is actually so through the roof with males, especially young men and adolescents right now, and that's before you factor in things like LGBTQ plus factors, race factors, other things that can be sort of in society put you even more out on an island. And I really am, as we're having all these conversations, I'm battling the sense that as a society, I want to say we're progressing, and yet these statistics are really making me question my assumption that we've got the needle pointed in the right direction, because how can we be societally figuring this out at the same time that we are out of control, spinning in a direction with a whole gender on mental health?
Yeah. Men's mental health is an important issue and is perhaps an issue that does not get a lot of attention. Cultural norms may emphasize behaviors that interfere with or even conflict with the notion that men may experience emotional duress, depression, fear, or anxiety. But we know these exist, and hesitance to acknowledge them may lead to even larger problems. Research shows that men are more likely to experience substance use disorders with rates 1.5 to 2.3 times higher than women. 6 million men are affected by depression in the United States every year, and men die by suicide at a rate of 4 times higher than women. Today we want to look at men's mental health head on. We'll address some common misconceptions about men's mental health and try to evolve some truths that span cultural and generational barriers today on OK State of Mind, a podcast from Family and Children's Services. All right, well, with that, let's start talking about some misconceptions about men's mental health. Before we get going, though, we have a couple of guests with us today. Of course, we have Adam Andreasen, Family and Children's Services CEO, but we do have a couple of new faces with us today. Jesse, do you mind going ahead and telling us a little bit about yourself before we get going?
Yeah, no, thank you, Chris, and thank you, Adam, and everyone here for inviting me to be part of this. This is fantastic. So I 2 years with the Tulsa Area United Way. I'm the Vice President of Community Engagement and Government Relations. Before that, I did almost 27 years with the Tulsa Police Department as their Workforce Director and their Hispanic Outreach Director.
Okay. All right. Anthony, how about you?
So my name is Anthony Adams. I'm the school-based program administrator here at Family and Children's Services. I've been with Family and Children's Services about 2 years, in the mental health field for about 2 years. And before that, I worked in healthcare and surgical services department. So I'm glad to be here.
All right. Sounds good. Good crowd today, and a big crowd. So today we want to talk a little bit about men's mental health and maybe dispel some misconceptions about it. And so I want to just present to you guys, the experts here, 5 misconceptions I believe are misconceptions about men's mental health. The first one that I want first to talk about is the notion that men are impervious to emotional duress because they're strong. And we kind of get this from the superheroes that we've seen on TV and in movies for so long, because they're physically strong. They are literally blocking the physical threats, but they also seem to be impervious to the emotional threats. And I think we've come to idealize these characters and aspire to be these characters. How has pop culture in general, I've talked a little bit about movies, but there are also other influences. How has this misconception come about, and what can we do about it?
I was gonna say, I think one of the things for me, being a millennial here, I think one of the things that is happening in culture now with a lot of our movies, I think that narrative is changing, but I think how it's been ingrained in our society for so long. Like even for me, being born in 1990, I know growing up with my dad, it was like, we don't cry about those things. We man up, toughen up, and do all those things, all those kind of negative connotations with growing up instead of being able to express those emotions. So I think it's something that's been ingrained in our society for a long time, and just even with media growing up and just different things where you see men in certain commercials, or you see when it comes to even medication, you don't see men in those commercials. You see a lot of
Oh,
you
that's
see
a
a lot
good
of women
point.
in those commercials. You don't see men in those, so it's just kind of something that's just been in our society for a long time.
And so you were born in 90 and you still were raised with this concept that men are impervious to. That's
Absolutely.
interesting.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Kind of old school culture that's in my family. So it's like a lot of things that my dad and his family had, just the same thing, just kind of growing up the same way. So
Which is fascinating because it's the same in the immigrant and Hispanic community across the board. You saw it from my perspective, basically learning English from television. And you had takeaways from TV shows in the 1980s that were, Miami Vice and these very A-Team and these very stoic
oh yeah,
people that solved problems. And you're like, okay, that is who my hero is supposed to be or what it's supposed to look like. And then when you turn to your own father or people that are involved in your family, and that's not how it works, or they kind of mirror that, but yet you don't really kind of like, how did you become that person and dealing with these kind of issues that we all know we all deal with day in, day out?
That's interesting. So you were being educated in language and then indirectly being educated about how to handle emotional duress.
Absolutely. You were constantly that resiliency piece that we all strive for, and in everything in life. You look at family as, or at least your earliest mentors, your parents, as those that will teach you how to deal with that stress and what is coming. It's not so much that you want them to bulldoze everything down for you. It's just how to manage that, because there's so many things in life that you have to deal with, that anxiety and stress. And what does that look like? And for me, I had a mother who had a mental breakdown, who suffered from severe depression and severe anxiety. So not having her as a resource and looking for that resilience piece is like, well, I turned to my father. Well, he was not around much because he was looking for ways to provide for the family. So now, if you are looking for ways to survive outside of the way some deal with it and cope with it, narcotics, other means of outward expression that is not necessarily healthy, if you're lucky enough to have the right kind of people to come into your life, then it guides you into that. If you look at a ladder, it that next step, and then obviously they hand you off to that next person. But internally within our house, we didn't talk about this stuff. And a lot of it was the people weren't equipped, and they were also taught by generational, just dealing with not talking about it, that this is how it's dealt with.
Yeah.
So how much of this is, we're in America, American context, but then you talk about immigrant context. How much it is generational? How much of it is cultural? How much of it is thank you, Marvel and DC, because you all did this to us? Like, where does this start and end? Is it an American thing? Is this a worldwide thing? Is it a gender thing? Like, you're like, hey, millennial, I got it. And you're immigrant, I got it. And I'm like, well, I probably roughly your age, but was born and raised here, and I got it. So, like, where did we catch it?
I want to say in the African American community, it's one of those things. A lot of times they tell us to pray about it and go to church. And I just actually read a study that a lot of young men now, they, instead of going to a mental health therapist, they're going to talk to their pastors. And so that's something that's ingrained in our community, being very spiritual and not talking to people we don't trust per se, because that was one of the things that was ingrained in me. Whenever my mom would send us to school, it would be one of those things like, hey, if somebody asks you questions, what happens in the house stays in the house. And it wasn't anything traumatic, but it was like, this is your house. We don't trust people that's not within our circle. And then when you brought up A-Team and things like that, I spent the summers at my grandma's house. So I remember watching A-Team, and then like, the Terminator growing up, movies that I probably shouldn't be watching when they were in the 90s, but it was like, you sneak and watch those things. But I always think of like John Wayne, because a lot of people outside of the United States, like when they come to America, they're like, oh, John Wayne was my first impression of how to be a man in America. It's like all these older movies and things like that. But I think, again, that's just something that was just ingrained in us. It was just kind of like the Marlboro Man. It's like the Western Cowboys, all these things. It's just,
So I have this perception that over the last, people growing up, really millennials, that they also had layered on, and tell me if this is accurate or not, layered on this sort of like, but also young men should be tamed and should be more sensitive and open. And it feels like there is that almost battling pressure or expectation to be more in touch with your feelings, to be a little bit, smoother and not as rough around the edges. And number one is that accurate? Has that been a pressure in a script? And if so, has it felt like battling or conflicting messages to man up and also be tame and staid and be more, in touch with your feelings?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I got the if you can call it the best of both worlds. I got the best of both worlds of being, like you said, kind of the millennial and seeing how things are. Where now we're told to talk about our feelings. And I have a daughter now, so it's like I have to be able to express that sensitive side. But then there's also that part of me that's still that quiet, like rugged individual where it's like I got to take care of the house. I got to take care of these things. So those things are still naturally ingrained in me, but you have to be able to talk about those things and be able to get those things out, especially when you're dealing with, when you move up. For me, if you move more up the corporate ladder as a man in a leadership role, you're not supposed to talk about things. You're not supposed to show emotions. You're supposed to be stoic whenever you're in a meeting. Not showing the emotions. But now, for me, it's like sometimes I'm able to show those emotions and not being judged for that, because that's for where a lot of men we are judged, and that's why we don't show our emotions, different things like that. But it's still at the same time, it's the other side of it where in certain times I'm like, I just sit back and don't show any emotion and be emotionless. Or even if I'm at home, interacting with my daughter, it's still like those times where I have to break down that barrier. Like, okay, I have to show this sensitive side of her. I just can't be this macho man or this guy outside of my house for that. So
you got to, and raising two middle school teenagers, and one boy, one girl, 14 and soon to be 13-year-old girl. So it's covering both grounds, right? Developing both of them, but then also being a good representation of who you'd want them to be when they're no longer a part of your life and they've chosen another. It's often said, the individual that your daughter is going to end up with is going to mirror a lot of what you have represented in their upbringing. So you're like, that's a lot of pressure. I gotta make sure that I step up. But then on the boy side, how do I create that strength? Researcher Richard Reeves talks about looking for someone who will be quick to respond to a shipwreck and like being the one that's going to be the one that goes and helps people, but then also adequate to go and dance with. So this like, okay.
No pressure on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's, to your point, Adam, where do we build that resiliency in our youth, but also understand that there's a time and a place to be open and vulnerable, and then be able to see that from a strength perspective, not a weakness. That you can be vulnerable with the people that need you to be vulnerable, to show them what does that look like.
So I went to school to become a psychologist in the aughts, and then we do these diversity seminars, and I always go back, you talk about misconceptions, I'm like, how much of that was told to me is true, formally told to me, still holds? And one of the questions I have, like, we did a whole diversity seminar on machismo and how much that is a Latino, Hispanic pressure and expectation on men. Number one, misconception or true, and either way, what impact is that have on the discussion about men's mental health?
Huge,
now.
Huge, and it's very true. It's something that...
What is it?
So it's just basically the stoicism that you see in a man. Goes to what you were talking about earlier, not talking about it. We're just going to bury it inside, and we're going to show strength through getting the job done, but never talking about what it took to get there or the hardship that you endured to get to that point. One of the data points that's always stayed with me over the years when I was doing Hispanic outreach at the Tulsa Police Department is that approximately around 70% of the people that come here undocumented into the United States come here with some sort of PTSD trauma from that journey.
What was the percentage?
Almost 70%.
Wow.
And so much of it is undealt with. So they get here, they establish themselves as immigrants and eventually residents, then U.S. citizens, they have children in the U.S. We're not dealing with, you know, this trauma that we dealt with riding the iron beast, that train that so many of our undocumented individuals ride. And then, you know, what does it look like to cross over into the United States border? And I'm talking about historical over our generation, but it's trauma that goes just untapped. And how do we help that so that then when they have their first generation American children, that they're able to somehow process that healthy-wise, and so it doesn't pass it down.
And
to
even
another
if the
child.
trip went perfect in a first-class carriage, it still is traumatic in one sense to completely change countries,
You're
context,
leaving
start
what you've
over.
known. Yeah.
Like I mean, even if it's a completely smooth trip with no trauma, there still is trauma with that transition.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you are taught machismo to bury it and deal with it on your own, whether you're crying by yourself or using some sort of suppression, alcohol, drugs, womanizing, you know, things that, and again, I'm not making generalizations, but there are, I know without my own father, that's how he dealt with things. And he was gone a lot because he had this pressure to provide for my family. So I didn't have that mentorship. I didn't have the, what does it look like to deal with your problems? So whatever that stress is, whether it was academic from an elementary, middle school, high school, and even going on to being the first in your family to go to college, to how to engage with a young lady, you know, what does that look like? So I had to lean on mentors, football coaches, baseball coaches, people in the community, pastors, to show me what does that look like to open a car door for a young lady or a door for someone, you know, the kind of things that you would like to look at your father to show you. But he was too bad still dealing with undealt trauma that he couldn't get past that, and therefore passing it down to me.
And then the script is unclear because there's what I see, and then there's what I feel, and then there's what's happening around me. All those things sort of informing what you should be doing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So you're leaning on strangers a lot. Mentors that, by the kindness of their heart, that look at you and like, you know what, I see some potential in you. I don't know what it is because you're a juvenile delinquent right now, but there's some potential, and that they guide you into that next step and chapter in your life. And this is how you end up kind of coming out the other end of that impoverished background.
Well, I know you said you had 5 misconceptions, and I have no idea if we jumped to 3 ahead.
You
or
got
not.
2 of them
Where
there.
are we
Yes.
at? Where are we at?
One, the first one, that men are impervious. The second one we touched on it during our conversation, and that is, okay, so men are not impervious. They're just supposed to bottle it up. One suggests they're devoid of emotional duress. The other one suggests we have it, we just have to clamp it down. And I think we covered that one.
Yeah.
So we have kind of acknowledged that, yes, men do experience trauma. They experience emotional ups and downs. And another misconception, I think, I'm just throwing this out there, is that, okay, so we have these issues, but we're not supposed to seek therapy. Men are not supposed to see a therapist or a counselor. No, that's not a male thing to do. And I'm curious, especially with you two, if you have seen this in your practice, like men coming in, or men not coming in, or women coming in and saying, yeah, I'm here, but my husband, he says, you know, this is not for men. I'm curious about, you know, if this is still happening, or if this is even a thing. Maybe I'm just making it up here.
I would say on 2 fronts. On the Hispanic side, yeah, seeking therapy is kind of one of those, we don't do.
Yeah.
Because and then also on the public safety side, the police side, you saw that as well,
yes,
something we don't do. Because both cultures, the police culture, the Hispanic culture, at least from the male perspective, is that somehow we have failed in our manhood. And the fact that I need to go and speak to somebody about some unresolved issues, either from my childhood or just some of the things that I've seen trauma-wise within my career or within my culture, the Hispanic culture, that goes unresolved. But yet it is taboo to look at it because somehow you become very vulnerable in saying, I'm going to go talk to a stranger when I can't even talk to my own family or my colleagues.
Yeah.
And then what you end up finding is I've seen police officers who have taken their own lives, and we see it both from the military standpoint, you see it on the police standpoint, that they just decided that this is their way to deal with it by ending it. In the Hispanic community, it is again that unresolved trauma, and even though maybe their children or maybe their grandchildren tell them, you need to go speak to a therapist. I know I tried that with my own mother. We took her to a therapist, but it never took. You could tell. I mean, it was she was dealing with the best that she could with it. I will tell you the biggest part of that, the greatest takeaway is that I got to sit through that and just hear what she dealt with from a trauma, because it was something that helped me figure out why. It's one of the reasons I studied psychology in undergrad, because I wanted to figure out why my family's so screwed up.
We all of us entered the field. We went to fix our own family and then said, well, this is going to take longer than I thought.
Exactly. But it spoke to just helping me better deal with my trauma from that, and then also that I can help with my children going forward.
See, I think in mental health, I think we have participated in the problem and maybe even made it worse at times, because there's this notion. I know people, when I was going to school for psychology, I know people that left the field or thought about leaving the field because they were afraid they were getting calloused. Oh, I'm hearing the stories over and over. And I'm like, here's the thing. If I have to dig holes all day, my skin is going to get tougher so that I have a resistance. And if every day my job in law enforcement is around trauma, I do have to build up a toughness to this, because I can't let it touch me and hurt me the same way over and over and over again. And if I'm a therapist, it's either I can be in the field for only a few years, or I have to get to the point in time that these stories don't touch me the same way they did 5 years ago. And yet, as a psychologist, I felt pressure to stay so sensitive that I was just as upset by these traumatic stories in year 5 as I was in year 1. How can that be? And I feel like we've sort of let down society and mental health with this notion that if you go to therapy, it's to get sensitive, it's to soften your skin, it's to sort of get where you're back to being touched by all that. And like, look, I think it's a better idea to think of it like restoring range of motion to an injured knee.
Yes.
You do therapy by reworking it so you have that range of motion. But if I'm in law enforcement, I have to restore a range of motion to either say, A, I can't do this anymore, I'm too traumatized, or B, I've restored an ability to take on this stuff that now is built up on me. And so I don't know if that's making sense, but I just feel like mental health itself, we've done wrong by giving people the impression that we're just here to keep you sensitive and soft.
Talk about your feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, that's just crazy. I was talking to somebody about like our parents growing up, and like generationally how when they're going through it, and if you live in a level of poverty or just even everyday life, like they're doing the best that they can with what they have. So if my mom's mom had trauma and passed it on to her about not speaking to somebody and getting help, and then she passed it on to me. So it's just these things that keep going. But I'm glad now that with social media or certain things, like it's not as such a taboo subject. So now if I feel like I need somebody to talk to, like I'm not ashamed to go and do it. Or if if my daughter needs a therapist in the future, like that's one of those things that we're just breaking those generational curses.
And it's not always a deficiency. It might be a skill acquisition. It might be something I want to level up on.
Absolutely. It's, hey, I'm having this tough situation at work, or I'm having this difficult point in my period now parenting a teenage girl. Like, what can you help me with that? Or can you help me navigate that? Or can you kind of help me, navigate how she's feeling so I can help her? So yeah, it's definitely one of those things that can be a strength more than talking about your feelings or being a weakness.
And you all both kind of touched on it in different ways, but I do wonder, not to try to get into the genetics of generational trauma, because I don't know, there's talk that there might be a genetic component, but who knows? But the ways in which the stories and the scripts get passed down, if your dad's gone, something gets transmitted when he's gone and then back. And so I do wonder how these stories transmit through generations, where maybe something my grandfather went through is affecting the script I have right now. I don't even know what his story was, but I can still feel the effects even if I'm not putting my finger on it.
Well, and then so being able to now, as I talk to my kids or my colleagues and close people to me, just them knowing from a vulnerable standpoint what I was raised under as the son of two immigrants, so that they have a better contextual understanding of, oh, okay, this is what here's his barriers and how do we help him, move forward. But it started with the U.S. American kid to decide, okay, how do we change this? Where when the immigrant parents or the grandparents, I mean, I have still a little understanding of what my grandparents went through, with the exception of having a U.S. citizen grandmother that was born in California, where they were told to mass deport during the 1950s. The issues going on with people coming back from Korea in World War II, and they wanted those low-skilled jobs back that the U.S. government had in place with the Bracero program with the Mexican government and the U.S. government. And they had said, hey, you need to leave California and go back to Mexico. And my mother was explaining to me the story of the trauma of being self-deporting themselves from California back to Mexico. And then when my mother was born in Mexico, she told me this story. But those are the small stories that I was able to kind of carve out some of the trauma that is unresolved, that has been passed down generationally, because my grandfather, when we used to go visit him in Mexico, or grandparents across the board, we didn't talk about it. You know, it was very faith ingrained. I mean, the one thing we did do is we just prayed a lot. We thought, you know, this pass it on to the Lord, because I ain't telling you what happened to me. But I'm going to tell the Lord.
Exactly.
And it is just spiritual in the way they handle things.
Talk about it seems like there is alternately harmony and tension states in our religious beliefs and expectations as it relates to mental health. Because there are times where people will say, well, that's a spiritual problem, that's a religious problem. So it sort of becomes separate. But then there's times where it's like, well, my faith informs my mental health. And then there's times where they're battling, like, you know, what's the solution here? And there's different people trying to lay claim to the same range and say, this is your solution, no, this is your solution. So you all both have mentioned faith at times as that intersection. How does faith intersect maybe less personally and more collectively in the expectations we put on ourselves? And that, you know, now we're talking about gender, we're talking about generation, and then we're talking about faith as alternately a tension or harmony state, depending on the moment or who's talking to me.
Absolutely. So in the Hispanic community, and you see it here in Tulsa, where the priest, the Catholic community, the priest is basically the family therapist. When I was doing Hispanic outreach for the Tulsa Police Department, I knew the quickest way to build relationships for me was to go through the churches. And as I built relationships with the pastors in these churches, I saw it on how many men and women, families that were going to their priest to not just to deal with spiritual questions, but to deal with family therapy questions, because they trusted that individual. It was a sanctuary, as we all know it so well. So these priests from all over the world, but here in Tulsa, that could speak 2 languages, were now intervening into these families to deal with whatever generational issue that they've been dealing with, or raising an American child. So I saw it that they needed not only kind of like a police officer, where they had some training on the mental health side, but they weren't therapists. That's not what they were doing. Well, on the spiritual side, you saw Spanish-speaking priests now really needing to lean in on psychology and therapy, because they were indirectly becoming families' go-to to deal with their stuff. Because they are taught that it's a safe space, it's a sanctuary, and oh, by the way, nobody's going to talk about your stuff because it's protected. Because as a family, we can come as the nucleus and deal with it, but we ain't going to talk about it the minute we leave this room, and we know that the priest ain't going to talk about it either.
Can I switch to schools for a second? Because I'm hearing him talking about the pressure on priests and clergy, and I'm thinking, I've seen so many statistics about the pressure that teachers can feel to be, they're the most trusted person in someone's life, and they might be the first one to know or detect something. And when I'm thinking about young men and the expectations on them, talk to me about the schools and the pressure within the schools, as well as how the educators are part of that continuum when it comes to changing the scripts.
I know our teachers have really, I mean, this year alone, our teachers have really been struggling with the behaviors and different things in the classroom. But I think it goes back to, services that can be provided there training or professional development for teachers, but the biggest thing is that the teachers are doing more of is building those trusts with those students. There was a situation in one of our schools that dealt with an African American kid, and the teacher was Caucasian, and so just based upon the training that she had, that she received, that she was able to, hey, I may not be the same color as you, but I understand what you're going through based upon the training. You see teachers, like there was the principal for McLean was actually in his community, you know, hey, I'm here for you. What do you need? You go to my school, you're my kids. Like I'm here for you. So just continue to build that trust, and just continue the education. I think that's been the biggest thing. But yeah, our kids are really struggling, and just our teachers being able to understand and try to relate to the struggles that they're going through in the schools.
I worry somewhat, and I know we're probably straying a little bit from the men's mental health angle, but I do worry that, you know, COVID started a exodus of teachers and educators because it's just too much. Everybody's mad at them. Everybody's expecting them to solve everything. The kids are overwhelmed, and I feel like it became a focal point. And one of the things I sort of worry about is, are we ever going to be able to stabilize the amount of supports that teachers need? And are people going to keep entering the field? Are we in some sort of crisis point already with the pressure on teachers and educators as it relates to mental health and supporting?
I think so, for sure. Like you said, COVID kind of ramped that up because, you know, they were trying to teach kids through a computer screen. And so I think, yes, for sure, we are in a crisis with our teachers because there's outside pressure, whether it's from
So politicized too.
yes, political standpoints. Like they want to do what's best for their kids, but they have to, oh, well, I have to teach you about standardized testing, even though you don't know how to read, but I still have to pass you. Or we're going to have to, you know, whatever's happened in Oklahoma, we may change the curriculum or what we have to teach in the classroom. So they have all these outside pressures on top of they're not compensated enough. So they have to worry about their own stress going outside. Like if you're a single parent as a teacher and you're getting paid $50,000 a year, like you're dealing with that stress on top of dealing with, you know, the trauma that these kids are bringing to
That's
school.
what I was going to say. They know what those kids are going
Yes.
through. They see it on their face and they
Yes.
hear the stories.
Yes, you know, because these kids are already coming in with circumstances like I didn't even get to have breakfast, or I'm wearing the same outfit every single day, or I saw my dad do something to my mom, or my dad is whatever. All these things that these kids are dealing with, the teachers are taking that on as well. So they're like, you're not paying me enough. You're not giving me the support I need in the classroom. You're not giving me the training and education to kind of deal with these issues. So why I can go work somewhere else.
And if they leave the field, they're never coming
They're
back.
never coming back, in my opinion.
For me, having a third grade teacher who spotted food insecurity, Mrs. Bogard, identifying that I wasn't eating and there was something going on at home without trying to solve all the issues that were going on at home, but she realized this kid needs some food.
Wow.
Fifth grade teacher who saw
That was one of your teachers.
That was one of my teachers, Mrs. Bogard. And then my fifth grade teacher, and I always say these teachers out loud because I want their existence to continue to go on, even though they've passed on. But Mrs. Odell, who bought me books that she saw the struggles in my reading because of, again, not having any help at home. But this is that stress that kids, even now, carry into the classroom. And from a bilingual, bicultural perspective, you have educators that are doing the best they can today. And now you're asking educators in the classroom to deal with not only people, the unresolved issues, but then also have a language barrier on top of that, which just adds to that extra stress. And I mean, you have to give it to educators, and God bless them, because every single day, and this is why they do what they do, but they also become ad hoc social workers and looking for ways to find resources for these kids to survive just within their own existence in this country, in the state, and in their own families.
I have no idea if we're on misconception 72 now, Chris, or what. So where are we at, and where do you want to go with
Well,
from
I
here?
mean, really, this entire conversation attests to the importance of role models in helping men grow and mature and become truly strong, not strong in the way that we see on TV or in movies, but truly strong. And that's what I hear. That's what I'm hearing in all of these stories. And I'll go off script a little bit too. And I don't want to get too personal with you all, but I'm curious about the role of siblings and birth order. Like if you are the eldest sibling, is the expectation different than if you're the youngest? And if you're a male and you have a sister, you have a female sibling as opposed to a male sibling, a brother, are expectations different there? Is this something that impacts us as men and growing and maturing in our mental health?
Go ahead, sir.
So I have a brother and a sister, but I'm the baby. So
Okay.
I get that advantage because
All right.
I was spoiled.
Oh, it's an
and-
advantage, isn't it?
Yeah, it was definitely an advantage of being the baby because at that point my mom was tired and she was like, I got away with everything. But my sister, she was tough. I'm gonna say nice things about them just in case they listen to this. But my sister was tough on me, and my brother was tough on me as well. And I think that kind of helped shaped how I was because I was the youngest, but I'm always gonna observe. I just sit back and watch things and just sit back and watch how they navigated things. And me being the baby really was really an advantage because I got everything, but also because I got to watch how they grew up and how they navigated things as well.
Yeah.
So I'm the oldest of three boys.
Okay.
And you were basically we used to say in the police world, the one that goes through the door and gets shot because you're the first that's trying to figure things out in life. And even when I was doing mentoring for families and when the Tulsa Police Department, I'd often talk about what does it look like to be first generation American to go to college.
Mm-hmm.
And I would lean on when I was giving presentations to high school kids, I would explain to how many of you are the oldest in your family? And quite a few would raise their hand. And I said, are you considering going to college? Because Tulsa Police required a bachelor's degree. So this was something that we often talk about. What does it look like to be the first in your family to go get an education? Mm-hmm. And I would tell them that if you are able to be successful in navigating higher education, your siblings are watching you. And, the parents don't know what it looks like to be the first to go to college, but the oldest does it and pulls it off. And I was raised alongside you and you showed an example that it can, because it is a nebulous journey for many. And what does it look like to go on to an institution, Stillwater, Norman, wherever, Tahlequah. But if you pull it off, then the odds of your siblings following you are very high. Mm-hmm. So you change the trajectory of your family's generation, which is a lot of pressure for a lot of them. But many do show up and say, go on to school, and then you have many that follow behind them, because they set the standard of what does it look like to go after a on-ramp to middle-class life.
This is also fascinating, and I'm also thinking, and some of those firstborns are sacrificing, working, doing,
Yes.
so that then what happens is they have foregone an opportunity
Absolutely.
that then their siblings step into. And so it seems like there would be a sacrifice possibility there too. And there's so many different directions we could go with this, but one of the things I just keep coming back and picking out the thread in my head, so I'm just going to say it out here, is how much should we as a society and as a mental health field be like, okay, get to therapy, get to the specialist versus, it's probably both and, but how do we equip society? Because hey, you've got teachers, you've got clergy, you've got siblings, you've got all these other people that if they were more conversant, they could lean in and be like, hey, Anthony, you're going through something, aren't you? And there's that. So how much effort should we be putting into societally getting everybody better equipped for being mental health supportive, mental health equipped? Hey, males, you don't have to participate in every script if it's not helpful, versus let's get you to the therapist to help you. I don't know that there's a right answer to this, but I do wonder how we go with leaning into what we do to equip society versus to help when there's a problem.
Really just having the vulnerability to ask for help. It may not be a therapist, it may just be a mentor, but looking for those. The resiliency for me is looking for the person that's going to help you get to that next chapter, through that next chapter, whatever that chapter is, whether it's dealing with some sort of trauma within the family or just looking for prosperity. And what does that resilience look like? And the vulnerability, because you're not taught to ask strangers or building those relationships with people that weren't part of your ethos within your community, but knowing that I need help to get to whatever prosperity looks like for them, and that it requires it's both. And to your question, Adam, in whether it's looking for somebody who does it for a living to help you with it, or just looking for somebody that you trust that you can ask, hey, how were you successful in this arena or dealing with these emotions? Because so many of us, they want to give to that next generation. They want to help that male, to figure it out, to get them past their divorce, to get them past whatever it is that they're working through. And that's just, as at our very core, it's to help. It's what I tell my team. We're humanity warriors. So smile because we're humanity warriors. Now, what does that look like? What does that look like to live it out? That means that if a man comes to you and says, man, I'm struggling with something. All right, I may not have the answer, but darn it, if we're not going to figure out who can I get you to at least get you to that next chapter, to do the things to be a better parent, to be just a better human being all the way around. But it's continuing to tell society that it's okay to ask for help. And it may be different forms of help, mentorship, professional help, but it's continuing to have that resiliency and say, not everybody has the answers, but Chris may have the answer. Adam may have a better answer. Anthony may have a better answer. I may be able to guide you in a different direction, but you being able to be vulnerable, and it's okay to continue to look for it.
I want to dive in probably even a little bit deeper here. I'm sitting here and we're having a great conversation about mental health, and we're talking about the scripts, we're talking about all the different factors, and I think that we would broadly perceive that maybe society has at least got the needle pointed in the right direction on reducing pressures and so on. And at the same time, what's running through my mind is depression and suicide risk is actually so through the roof with males, especially young men and adolescents right now. And that's before you factor in things like LGBTQ plus factors, race factors, other things that can be sort of in society, put you even more out on an island. And I really am, as we're having all these conversations, I'm battling the sense that as a society, I want to say we're progressing, and yet these statistics are really making me question my assumption that we've got the needle pointed in the right direction, because how can we be societally figuring this out at the same time that we are out of control, spinning in a direction with a whole gender on mental health?
Yeah. When I'm, scrolling through TikTok or just looking at certain videos, I feel like sometimes the message about mental health and talking could be out there a little bit too much, because for some people who's already experiencing loneliness or already experiencing those symptoms, and you see something pop up, it may just trigger that even more. Because every other clip you may see, especially during Men's Mental Health Month or any kind of awareness month that's related to mental health, it's very prevalent on social media, and it's in short clips. And so these people are seeing things, or people are seeing things. So I think
they're hearing that there isn't hope, or they're hearing that they are in trouble, or
exactly. So they're just hearing these things, and so it's good that it's changing, because we are putting that message out there. You are seeing more people of color talk about mental health like that. It's out there, but then there's those messages out there, like you said, there is no hope, or they see something, they're like, and it triggers something inside of them. They're like, oh man, I'm dealing with this, so let me just.
So not just being facetious, we need to make sure that any short we put out doesn't just have that sobering statistic, but also the statement that says, and remember, and then it's a message of hope. You don't have to be a statistic, that sort of a thing, so that we're never pairing it just with, look how bad and dire it is.
Absolutely. That is so imperative, because you're getting both messages. Like, we understand, you're recognizing that it's there, but here's the solution. Whether it's like, you have a mentor, you go see a therapist, or you go see your pastor, but it's also continuing to make those relationships in the community with those individuals that, hey, as a pastor, I can only do so much. Let me refer you to whoever to be able to make sure you continue this journey where you can do both simultaneously.
It's too bad that disclaimer is not included, that you just said in every social media message out there. Like, hey, I'm just social media. You need to talk to somebody who, to an expert.
For those young men who are dealing with things, or anybody who are dealing with those things, that's all they hinge on, because that takes them from reality. People think social media is reality, and that is not the case. But for them, that's all they see. So if they see that, that's gospel for them. So they're like, oh yeah, this is it. This is it. So I feel like you said, having that two-part message where this is the truth, but this is how we fix it.
There was some study, again, I heard in school sometime, where what was one of the most determinative factors about a child that didn't know their parent is what they were told about their parent. Because people tend to think their destiny is what's happened before them. And I do think that it kind of speaks to on social media, and they found it in studies of people with a traumatic brain injury. If you tell a whole group of people you're likely hopeless and your depression's only going to get worse, suicide shoots up. And it's not always about the head injury. It's that we've told you your life is basically over now. And that message starts to be the weight, and they don't see it beyond that. So I think it's a really important point that as important as what's true is what people believe to be true, and what the scripts are and what we tell them is that hope piece, or that your destiny is not what your parents or grandparents did or lived through. Absolutely. That has to be part of that pivot, because we do tend to, and they've even done studies with teachers. If they point out a kid and they say, that kid's gifted, that kid's not, and they have the exact same IQ, guess what? The one that was gifted starts doing better because the teacher is silently and not even thinking about it, investing more in the gifted kid. And so what we believe to be true becomes such a determinative factor in what comes true.
Well, and so much of it is in building that resiliency in teenagers and teenage boys is showing them that you can survive it, whatever it is that you're dealing with, and using the narrative, continuing narrative of where you started out doesn't mean that's where you're going to end up. So whether you're trying to get that impoverished child, that teenage boy, into a middle-class on-ramp, as we always talk about, is standing before them, and that's something that I've always done, and being vulnerable and telling my story so that they see, oh, wait, I can come from Section 8 housing or a trailer park and have a middle class or upper middle class life. Yes, you can. It's going to take some work, but you can, and it's going to take you asking for help to get there, because you don't have that perfect family structure to help you scale up, on your own. So you need to go out and ask for that help. But it's continuing to drive that narrative, to your point, of there is hope and you can make it. But it's reminding them that, man, you're 17 or you're 27. You got a long way to go, but you got to keep striving. You got to keep working towards that.
I wonder too, there's a growing mountain of literature about the effect of what used to be called helicopter parenting, now gets called bulldozer parenting. Helicopter is I swoop in and keep you from having to go through something. Bulldoze is no, let me just get it out of the way so you don't even have to know it was there. And there's such a multi-generational body of literature now of the impact on workforce and happiness and depression. And I do wonder if that's part of the discussion too, is we really zero in on males and what we tell them about imperviousness. But I also think there has to be some element of that we as a society are also at times overprotecting people from struggle. And if they never learn to struggle, they never learn that they can work through it, and they never find their strength. And so I think that has to be part of the discussion too, is not just, hey, Anthony, you can talk about your feelings, but also, hey, Anthony, you can work through this, and the struggle is not a thing to be avoided, rescued from, bulldozed. That has to be part of this equation too, doesn't it? It's okay to struggle. We can struggle, and we can work through stuff.
As you should, because that's life. Yeah. I mean, it's, we talk about often in my own family, I tell my kids, fall 6, and then they yell back to me, rise 7. Why? Because it's about getting knocked down and getting back up. Because this is what's going to happen. You're going to take punches. That's just life. Now, what does it look like to stand back up? And not to have all the answers when you stand back up. It's just stand back up. To your point, about helicopter parenting or those parents that bulldoze everything to the ground. It's getting the teenage boy, getting the kids ready for the road, and not redoing the road for them. And that ultimately, because when they show up and mom and dad or whoever's not there to help them, and then they realize, wow, the road is a lot tougher, or this life is a lot tougher than I was ready for, many of them don't know what to do from that point on.
And it's funny that you say that. It had me thinking about how, we've talked about how we've grown up in those generational things, but to your point, what you just said, you just gotta, it's gonna happen. You have to deal with it. Your struggle is going to happen. So I think that's that blessing with it comes to growing up with that tough mindset was you're gonna struggle, but it's about how you're gonna get up, and if you need the help, get it. So it's just interesting that you still like, you're gonna fall, you're gonna struggle, but how do we get through that?
And I think knowing the difference, as a parent, it's easy for me to say, oh, don't be a helicopter until my child is crying, right? And when my child is crying, oh my gosh.
What can I say?
And I think that's where, again, if I have too much weight on my shoulders, I can either end up with muscles or a torn shoulder. And it depends on how much and how much I could sustain and what was my measured response. And I feel like that's one of those areas, like we need to support people and children that they feel they can work through a thing while also not decimating them with struggles. And that's easier said than done, but it does feel to me like we've maybe gone too far as a society with, we counteract the trauma happening by then saying, let's go the other way and make sure it never even touches something that would be hard and would struggle. And again, it sounds conceptually easy, but when your child's crying or when the student in your class is crying or overwhelmed, it's a much harder distinction of what should I let them work through versus not. Kids are talking mean to them. Should I go talk to that teacher and be like, how are they talking mean? Or should I be talking to my kid about strategies for dealing and accepting that people are going to have their perspectives? That's really, really hard to know what to do in that moment.
The best coaches are the ones that build you in the way that things are going to get hard. We're just going to learn how to do hard better. That ultimately is what you're looking for in a therapist and a mentor, at least to help you with that resiliency. Man, we used to say in the military, embrace the suck. And you're just going to have to get through it. But what are the lessons as you go through that suck that you can build those layers to help you get to that next chapter in your life towards that success you're looking for?
Maybe part of the truth with men's mental health and with mental health is that we do want to be stronger, and that this notion of being impervious, it's a brittle sort of imperviousness if nothing ever touches me, but a healthy body has muscle and is flexible and adaptable, and that's part of being healthy. And I wonder if mental health-wise, there is a truth to, as men, we need to be stronger. We just need to redefine strength. And strength is not merely I'm impervious and I'm a brick. It might be I'm flexible, I'm adaptable, I can respond. But at that point, we're not saying to a man, don't be strong, because that's a really hard script to undo. Yeah. But what we are saying is let's change the frame on strength so that it includes more adaptability, more strength, more responsiveness, because that actually is stronger.
Vulnerability to add to that.
Yeah.
That showing strength is being vulnerable, letting the people you love, the people you care about, realize you don't got it all figured out. And you're trying to, move forward and being a good husband, a good parent, a good teacher, if you will. But at the same time, they see is like, okay, well, maybe dad's not perfect. He's not Superman, but he's looking, he's constantly looking for how to stand up a teenage boy or how to help a teenage and build and stand up a teenage girl. So it's all those things, but it's also showing that vulnerability that, I don't have all the answers, so help me. How can we go together to solving whatever it is as we're making it the next generation?
You're Superman and Clark Kent. You're both of them. Where you are, you're extremely impenetrable unless it's what is Superman? What is his kryptonite? Yeah. But then you're also Clark Kent. You're normal.
Yeah.
You're the normal human, those normal feelings. Him and Lois Lane. Trying to navigate that relationship. So I think you have, like you said, you have to be both.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be both.
And again, I love that analogy, that thought, because it invokes so much adaptability. Mm-hmm. We have to be adaptable, especially when we're probably not going to go on a hunt for a woolly mammoth anytime soon. Those days are gone. So how we adapt now has got to be different. It's just, we're not going back to that.
No.
Well, I think another misconception is that if a man is in a happy marriage, he's good. Mentally, he's on top of things. He's sound. He's happy. He's content. As long as you're in that good marriage, there's that saying, if mom's happy, everybody's happy.
Happy wife, happy life.
Yeah. and while that obviously, having a happy spouse, that's very enriching and it does bring, peace to our lives and happiness, but is that the end all be all of that notion?
I'm not married, but being in a relationship in general, I feel like that's great that you're in a happy relationship, but sometimes again, your wife may not know, or your significant other may not know what you're battling with yourself. Like you're navigating life with your wife and everything's good, but you're like, man, you know, I got my hours cut at work, or how am I going to pay the mortgage this month, or all these external things that us as men, as providers, that we're supposed to take care of. And so while your marriage may be happy because you're sucking it up and you're taking care of it, you're still dealing with those battles. So that's my 2 cents on the.
I've seen a lot of research that says that one of the single greatest decision you're going to make is who you're going to spend your life with as far as a partner, because I've seen it time and time again with friends who are dealing with divorce or family members that are in bad marriages, and you not having that safety net, if you will, to help you, not only help you with whatever you're dealing with, but then also help you grow and that person that you want to be. And it's so just paramount to find that person that both understands your background. And that's one of the things that I could say is being vulnerable to that partner, and like, what are you carrying before you come into that relationship, so that that partner knows, okay, this is what I'm signing up for. How do we vet the problem? And then sometimes it's just talking through it that like gets you to that point. It's like, all right, this is not the end of the world. We'll figure it out. We'll move forward. But it is so important that you do find that partner in life that you can walk life through, because I mean, how lonely would it be to not have that person that you're with at home, that you can't have these honest conversations about what you're dealing with? Or maybe there's some skeletons that your family were hiding that you discovered, and then you can't go talk to your spouse about, or your partner about, because you're worried how they're going to deal with it. And so being very vulnerable and very upfront in what you're dealing with as you are learning each other, because this way it's a beautiful thing to go into a unity where he or she decides, all right, I'm still picking you even though you're dealing with all these Hispanic issues and all these other things that are layered on top of that, but I'm going to go alongside you. We're going to figure it out together.
And I think this is a great example where this is an and, not a but. And whether you spend your life with someone or don't, or start to and lose, or whatever it is, the scripts are helpful until they're not. Because no human, I have never successfully been fully whatever any human needs, and no human has ever successfully been everything I need, because it's not realistic for someone to be everything to someone else.
Right.
And I think that's part of the pressure, is like, whether I have a partner or not. If I don't have a partner, I should. My life is incomplete. If I do, then how come they're not fully fulfilling me? And how come I'm not fully fulfilling them? Or I think I'm protecting them, and I find out that, well, guess what? Their cortisol levels are still just as stressed out, because if they know I'm stressed, it doesn't matter if I'm protecting them. Or I want them to protect me, and then they're not there. And I feel like that's one of the challenges, and maybe even myths of partners, is that partners are those sort of perfect supports to us, when in fact it's probably more like hoping that we're both lifting the table at the same time. You know, like there's just so many times in which a partner is not a replacement for anything. A partner is just that, they're a partner. The scripts about partners and the pressure we put on ourselves and on our partners, it's a huge part of this story.
And it's finding that person that knows they can't help you with whatever issue you're dealing with, but they're willing to say, all right, let's go find you that therapist. Because I don't have the answers, but I appreciate you being vulnerable to share with me what you're dealing with, and let's go find you that professional help.
Be inadequate together.
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, again, it's just starting out with that vulnerability. It's like, look, this is what I'm dealing with, and like, okay, well then let's figure it out. And that person, and sometimes they need to be your champion. It's like, you are not calling the therapist, so I'm going to call the therapist, and we're going to set this up. But it is, if you're looking at a spouse, a partner for life, that's what you're looking at. I take you as broken as you are, and for the rest of the way, but doesn't mean that I'm going to have all the answers, but we're going to seek those answers together.
We have talked about a number of resources, mentors, family and friends, our spiritual leaders, therapy. And as we wrap up here, I'm curious if any of you have any additional resources that you think that you have found to be particularly helpful in men's mental health?
Well, thank you for asking the question, Chris. I would say at the Tulsa Area United Way, we have a system in place. It's called 211 that you can call, starting the dialogue on what it is that you're dealing with, and it's in both languages. So, well, the Hispanic community, if you're needing somebody to speak Spanish to, you can call 211 and ask for help in whatever you're needing help with. It is a resource that we provide at Tulsa Area United Way. And it's something that if you can't get it at home, and maybe you're a teenage boy who's looking for some kind of assistance that you maybe don't want your parents to know, well, then call 211 and just say, hey, I'm looking for something in this component of therapy. But it's there. So it's there every day, 24 hours a day, and we'll help you find whatever it is that you need on the resource side.
Yeah, that sounds good. Gentlemen?
But I don't know that I have more resources other than to think, as I'm sitting here enjoying every bit of this discussion, my biggest takeaway is finding ways of accepting and leaning into I'm going back to the inadequacy, to the weakness, that things aren't there, relieving the pressure on ourselves, I think is an important thing that male or female, child or adult, that just feels like some of it is, let's talk about something we haven't even hardly talked about today, like grief. The ways in which we have taught people that there's a right and wrong way to grieve has basically added guilt and pressure onto a thing that already really sucks.
Yeah.
And like that's to me is like so much of this is about the pressure we put on ourselves, the shoulds and the musts that start to be then the mechanism of torture, instead of accepting that we struggle and accepting the flexibility of life coming our way and bringing us pressure.
Yeah. That's the problem with the scripts that you were just talking about a little bit earlier.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback off what Adam said, I think not really resource, but just making sure that you have those individuals in your life that you can have these honest conversations with. Because I have friends and family, well, mainly my friends, that I can have these honest conversations with. Like I call my friend the other night, like, you know what? I'm having one of those days. I just need you to sit here and just listen to me rant while I'm driving home. And, he did that, and like I was perfectly fine. He did the same for me. So just having those.
And he probably felt fed too, because when someone calls you and needs you, you feel better.
Yeah.
And just being there for that person, and having, people that are there for you. I think, just finding those people that you can be vulnerable with is really, really important.
Well, thanks guys for being here. Talk about this extremely important topic. If anyone listening to the podcast is experiencing issues, particularly with men's mental health, we've brought up some resources today, the Tulsa Area United Way, Family and Children's Services, wherever it is, whether it's at these two places or somewhere else. If you are facing turmoil right now, seek some help, whether it's professionally or friends or family or pastors. I think that's one of the biggest things that we've kind of identified today, is that there's nothing wrong with seeking help. There's nothing wrong with a man seeking help. As a matter of fact, probably just contributes to that strength that people perceive men as having. So thanks again, all of you, for being here today, and hope to have you on again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. If you found value in what you heard today, there are a few ways you can support and stay connected to us. First, be sure to hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening to us. Subscribing ensures you never miss an episode, and it's absolutely free. It also helps us continue bringing you quality content. Consider leaving us a review. Your reviews not only make our day, but they also help others discover the podcast and join our community. Share this episode with friends, family, and anyone who might find it interesting. Word of mouth is a powerful way to grow our podcast family, and we truly appreciate your support. We're always eager to hear your thoughts, ideas, and suggestions. Email us at communications@fcsok.org with any episode ideas or questions. We'd love to connect with you. To learn more about Family and Children's Services, visit fcsok.org. Until next time.